Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Let's go ahead and get started. We've got some tons of ground to cover, so let's go ahead and get started this morning. Straightway. Let me see if everything is working as it's supposed to. Yes. Okay. Let's pray, and then we will start. Lord, thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you for your word and the clarity that it has, the details and the conciseness, and so much so that we can track these things historically. I pray, God, that this would be beneficial, informative for us, that it would underscore that you indeed are a God that does not lie, and that you have laid out, Lord, not just the history of Gentiles, but also Israel as well. We thank you so much for who you are and for what you give to us in regards to the truth. For it's in your son's name. Amen. Okay, here we go. Part 4 of Daniel's revelation or apocalypsis is the word here. Let's go ahead and reorient ourselves to where we are on the general timeline. As you can see, there's all these diagrams and charts and things like that. There will be more of them. Let's go ahead and reorient ourselves to where we are. We are at the reign of Cyrus the Great right here, and Darius the Mede as the co-regent of the Babylonian Empire. At this time, Daniel has seen some prophecies come to pass. As a matter of fact, Cyrus is the one that issues the decree, the declaration for Israel to go back and rebuild Jerusalem and the temple. Daniel has saw this. Okay, so he's right in the thick of this. Okay. The third year of, or the first year, the third year of Cyrus the Great's reign is where we are right now at this time between chapters 10 and 12. Okay. This is where all of these, this vision that Daniel sees and this information that he is given is taking place. There is an individual, a messenger, a divine messenger who goes we're not told his name, but Daniel describes him as a certain man, or the one man that is before Daniel. And this divine being, this divine creature is so majestic, so mighty, so glorious that Daniel is terrified as a result of it. This is found in chapter 10. There's even people around him that don't see this divine being, but somehow this divine, they can sense something there, so much so that it scares them to death, and they run away from Daniel to try to get away from what they're sensing. This messenger, this divine messenger, has been sent to Daniel to give him a particular message, as Daniel was praying and petitioning the Lord for about 21 days concerning Israel, his people. And so now the one man, the certain man, the divine being is coming and going to tell him essentially Israel's role in light of the Gentile rulers. There's this kind of this parallel going on here that we're seeing kind of both tracks. We see the rise of the Grecian Empire and Alexander the Great. He rules from 336 to 323 BC, takes up a vast amount of territory and land, but his reign is not that long. The one man tells Daniel about these kings. First, it starts with Alexander the Great, of course, which comes after the reign of Persia. Because Alexander the Great's reign is not that long, and his land, his property is so vast, it's split between his 4 generals, which are right here. Seleucus I, of the ruler of the east, controlling Babylon, parts of Asia Minor, things like that. You have Ptolemy, the ruler of the south, which controls Egypt in large part. and maybe even just some all the way up to maybe even a little bit of the land of Canaan, which is Israel. You have Cassander, the ruler of the west, which takes up, how should I say this? Like some places of Europe, parts of Europe and things like that. And then you have Antigonus, the ruler of the north, which is, again, Syria, Turkey, all of these things. This reigns the period of the successors. These are the successors of Alexander the Great. And there are conflicts back and forth, wars, battles, lots of alliances for the sake of power. Those alliances are broken, backstabbing, a lot of double crossing going on. And as a result of it, the four lands get consolidated essentially into two. Okay. Ptolemy ends up the ruler of the south, and Seleucus I, the ruler or the king of the north. And this is the focus from now until the end of the chapter 11, where the specific kingdoms, the ruler of the route, the king of the north and the king of the south, are examined. Now, it must be said, too, that the phrases king or rulers of the south and the north, they are titles. They are titles, okay? And so, which each king that rises in these particular areas, they take on the title of king of the north or king of the south. So, from some review from last week, the one man that is this angelic divine being that was sent by God to Daniel described to Daniel the back and forth conflict between the king of the north and the king of the south. This is going to happen all the time, right? They're just going to exchange power, exchange land, double cross each other, things like that. In the center of this power and influence of these two kingdoms is Israel. And today, Israel is going to play very significantly into one of the battles that takes place here during this time when the one man communicates to Daniel. So now we look here, again, after these four Persian kings, again, we see Seleucus I and Ptolemy I. That starts the king of the north and the south. We have Antiochus I Soter, which is the ruler of the king of the north after Seleucus I, from 281 to 262 BC. After him is Antiochus II Theos, wonderful. Oh, these names, man, they're all self-aggrandizing. All of them, they think so highly of themselves. Then we have Seleucus II Callinicus, and 246 to 225. On the ruler of the south side, we have Ptolemy II Philadelphus from 285 to 246, and then Ptolemy III Irrigentus, which means benefactor, from 246 to 222. This is where we've left off at, right? As we've been going through this text here. Okay. This is where it can get very confusing. For the next several verses or the next several statements, the one man speaking to Daniel, these statements that we are going to examine from chapter 11, verses 10 and following, up to this point involve three specific kings. Ptolemy IV, we're going to touch on Ptolemy V a little bit. We may, Lord willing, talk about him next week. Okay? That's the southern family. And Antiochus III, the northern family. All these events that take place concerning these particular texts seem to overlap each other. So 10 and 11, 12, 13, 14, they're all the same event. They're just looked at in different angles concerning the king of the north and the king of the south. I'll show you what I mean in a minute as we walk through this here. Let's go ahead and jump in. Daniel chapter 11, verses 10 and following. It says this: his sons will mobilize and assemble a multitude of great forces. And one of them will keep on coming and overflow and pass through, that he may again wage war up to this very fortress. The king of the south will be enraged and go forth and fight with the king of the north. Then the latter will raise a great multitude, but that multitude will be given into the hand of the former. Again, this is the one man, the certain divine angelic being speaking to Daniel. So far, we've been doing like a forensic investigator, extracting as much details as we can and comparing it to previous events in world history concerning this area and these two kings. Let's do the same here. The first one is the king of the north's sons will stir up and assemble abundant armies. Okay, this is again verse 11, okay, of chapter 11. I'm sorry, verse 10, chapter 11. One of the sons of the kings of the north will keep coming and overwhelm the king of the south. They will come up to his fortress. Okay. Then we see that one of the sons of the kings of the north will complete this with the intention to return again and wage war with the king of the south up to his stronghold. Okay. This is again statement 10 and 11. Due to these actions, the king of the south will become enraged or extremely embittered and basically be contentious with the king of the north. He will go and do battle with the king of the north. The king of the north will amass a great army, a massive army that is greater than the king of the south. However, this army, although it is massive, will lose. Even though it has a lot of power and a lot of men, he will lose to the king of the south. That is statement 11. So let's talk about Antiochus III. Let's switch gears and talk about this. So Antiochus III, again, was the son of Seleucus II and the brother of Antiochus II. We've talked about them, right? Let's go ahead and build out this family tree here. So the king of the north here, we have Seleucus II and Laodice, which was Seleucus II's wife. We remember Seleucus, right? Seleucus was the guy who married Bernice, and Laodice got extremely upset, and we know the rest of the story here. We have Antiochus III, which is who we're talking about right now. He ruled from 223 to 187 BC. And again, he is the son of Seleucus II by Laodice. Seleucus also had another son by the name of Seleucus III, who is also the son of Laodice and Seleucus II. Okay, so we have Antiochus III and Seleucus II. Okay. So, a little intermission here. Let's go back and look at this. So we have Seleucus III over here. Okay, so we're going to take a brief little intermission to talk about Seleucus III for just a second. So Seleucus III, his first order of business was to recapture Pergamum from his cousin Attalus I. Okay, again, Attalus I was related to Seleucus. He sent a general whose name is Adramachus. I love these names, man. That's a man's name right there. To contend with Attalus. Andronicus lost that fight. So Seleucus, in order to avenge essentially Andronicus, decided to come up against Attalus himself in the region of Phrygia. But he was assassinated in 2023. So he didn't rule all that long. Okay. So Seleucus III ruled for about 2 years after he was assassinated. After this murder, he was succeeded by Antiochus III. Okay. So Seleucus III takes the throne. He rules for 2 years, is assassinated, right? And then after that assassination, Antiochus III takes the throne. Now, let's go back to Antiochus III. In 219, after taking care of some conflict within his lands, because again, whenever you have an assassination, there's an uprising, right? People don't feel happy about that, right? They may have not have liked Antiochus III. They may have been fond of Seleucus. So he crushes some conflict within his own region. And then he begins to engage what has been known as the Fourth Syrian War. So there's been 4 wars so far within this region for control and power. The first thing that Antiochus III does is he takes control of seaports. This is important for economic power, right? So he takes control of significant seaports across the Mediterranean and within Turkey. This is an important stronghold here that he takes a hold of. When you get a hold of the seaports and all of that stuff running through it, you can amass great territory very quickly, which is what he did. Other seaports included Tyre, again, which is a great city port, and Ptolemais, which is another region in Upper Israel. In 2018, a year later after that, he takes control of Lebanon. He takes control of Israel. He takes control of Phoenicia. So he's just rolling up territories. That's all he's doing right now. This underscores what is said in chapter 11, verse 10 of the text here. He says, his sons will mobilize and assemble a multitude of great forces, and one of them will keep on coming and overflow and pass through. He's just gobbling up territories at this point. The next year after that, in 2017, Antiochus III engages in an army of 75,000 against Ptolemy IV, who had 68,000 soldiers. That is a lot when you're talking about this particular campaign, and who sought to engage Ptolemy IV. He wanted to take essentially control of, basically go into Egypt. Okay. So the battle ensued. Ptolemy IV again amasses his resources, and they go to battle. Ptolemy, that is Ptolemy IV, did suffer loss, but he ultimately defeated Antiochus III. There's another character or another person within this narrative here that I'm omitting. I'm going to get to him later on. But he ultimately defeated Antiochus III and gained control of the region of Canaan, or Israel. Antiochus lost his entire army and was almost captured. The reason why that happened is because before all this, the king of the south, or Egypt and all them, they were usually mercenary fighters. They weren't really a full-on army that was trained until they discovered that the king of the north was coming for them. So they amassed a whole bunch of people in Egypt to be trained in Egyptian warfare. Okay? Later on, there was a peace deal that was brokered by Ptolemy IV and Antiochus III, and he gave up all the ground that he had lost. So gave up Lebanon, gave up Israel, gave up all of the lands that he rolled up, with the exception of the ports within Turkey. He let him have those. So we see that the king of the north, even though he amassed all of this territory, he had all of these soldiers, he lost to Ptolemy IV, which is an incredible thing to think about. However, we see that within this particular message of the one man, the detail shifts in verse 12. It says, when the multitude is carried away, his heart, that is the king of the south, heart will be lifted up, and he will cause tens of thousands to fall, yet he will not prevail. One simple sentence, and there's so much detail here. Holy smokes. So we see that the multitude is carried away. That multitude refers to the king of the north and his army. Okay? That army that was defeated, that 75,000 plus. When the multitude is carried away, the king of the south's heart will be lifted up or exalted, and he will cause tens of thousands to fall. So again, when the king of the north's multitude or army is swept or carried away, the king of the south's thinking, again, will be high, will be lifted up. Okay? He will think that he's the man, right? He beat 75,000 soldiers, almost lost all of his soldiers, had the king of the north running back to the hills. He did this little peace treaty, gave back all the land. I mean, you would think that you would be, you'd feel pretty good about that. The attitude, though, that the king of the south possessed in effect will cause thousands to be killed in his own land. And the plans that he desired to complete, he will not prevail in that succession. So his rule essentially will be ineffective. How can a guy who just wiped out an entire army of individuals have this outcome? It's bizarre. Let's take a look at the southern family tree here. We have Ptolemy III in 284 to 246 BC. And his mom or mother is Bernice II. Then we have Ptolemy IV, who ruled from 222 to 204 BC. And is, of course, the son of Ptolemy III and Bernice III. Ptolemy III and Bernice II also had a daughter as well. This daughter was named Arsinoe III, who is the daughter of Ptolemy III and Bernice II. Now, why would I bring up Arsinoe III? Yeah. Ptolemy IV was not a good guy. Let's just say that. Let's talk about him. Ptolemy IV ascended to the throne after his father passed in 221 BC. During the Fourth Syrian War, that stretched from 219 to 216, while the king of the north was capturing the coastal cities, he was rolling up, consolidating all of this power. One of Ptolemy's best commanders defected from his rule. Well, why did he do that? Because Ptolemy IV, although he was a king of the south, he was a very, 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 very corrupt king. His administration was poor, and his rule, people didn't necessarily like him too much. However, the threat was grave for the Ptolemaic Empire. That is the king of the south, that Egyptian soldiers, again, were specially trained in warfare for the king of the north. Remember, I told you that most of the king of the south, they were mercenary fighters and things like that, you know. And so they had trained specifically for this war, for the Fourth Syrian War. Again, in 2017, Ptolemy's forces met the king of the south forces in Rafia. That is the Gaza Strip in Israel, the southernmost part of the Gaza Strip. This is where that battle took place. The 68,000 versus the 75 in Rafia. And Ptolemy was successful in battle. This was about all he gets credit for. The perspective of Ptolemy in relation to his rule, he was, again, an incredibly corrupt and debauched king. So after the Battle of Rafia, he was feeling pretty good about himself. And he didn't have a successor to the throne, right? Now, you could have picked anybody to marry. But, you know, as the story goes, you know, the fruit doesn't fall far from the tree. So Ptolemy decides to marry his sister in 216. And in 210, she bore him a successor to the throne who would ultimately become Ptolemy V. Okay? Now, Ptolemy V is a young ruler, okay? When he ascends to the throne, he's going to be a young ruler. So Ptolemy V is the progeny of Ptolemy IV and Arsinoe III, his sister. I'm telling you, man, if Netflix ever wanted to create like a Game of Thrones Bible style, I mean, that's crazy. So now we have Ptolemy IV and Arsinoe III, keeping it in a family. And now we have Ptolemy V. We won't get to Ptolemy V today. We'll get to him some other time. Let's continue to talk about Ptolemy IV here. So the Egyptians, now they're trained in battle, right? They used, again, mercenary fighters. They were kind of, there was kind of spats here and there in Egypt, but now they're pretty trained in fighting skillfully, right? So the Egyptians, now that they're trained in battle, they're tired of Ptolemy IV. They're tired of him. Okay, they don't want to have anything to do with them. They're tired of the weak administration. They're tired of the ruling. You're really not, marrying your sister in that particular culture was common, but it wasn't common amongst, at least it wasn't supposed to be common amongst royalty, lineage though. They weren't supposed to do that. But Ptolemy did that anyway. And so they rose up, those Egyptians that were skilled, they rose up in a rebellion that started in 205 and lasted until 186 BC. This is at the end of the reign of Ptolemy IV and right in the middle of Ptolemy V's reign. I mean, it lasted that long. Historians call this period the Great Revolt. And it was described as guerrilla warfare, using the tactics that they had learned and were trained to fight the king of the north. They turned all of those tactics to the king of the south. There was a internal battle within Egypt between the Egyptians that were tired of the rule of Ptolemy IV and, of course, Ptolemy IV's men. And lots of lives were lost. This was, again, due to battle. This was due to capture, execution, right? Well, for individuals, Egyptians that would be captured and would be basically hung for treason. This is underscored in verse 12 of chapter 11. It says, when the multitude is carried away, his heart will be lifted up, and he will cause thousands to fall, yet he will not prevail. It is also believed, too, that Ptolemy IV, in order to maintain power and consolidate his power, that he murdered his mother, his uncle, and his brother by way of his commanders, his faithful commanders. He basically plotted to have his commanders murder his progeny, his closest progeny. Now, even though Ptolemy was a corrupt leader, again, he had a whole bunch of people around him that were pretty faithful to him and his rule. So, in a style that is akin to our former president, in 2005, Ptolemy died and kept his leadership. His leadership kept his death a secret. You know how like they kind of kept our former president's health a secret for a year, right? Couple years, actually. For an entire year, no one knew that he passed. And his administration was making all these decisions in his name as if he was living. About a year later, his wife, sister, was murdered. Okay? Again, lots of intrigue here. And we don't know who murdered them or who murdered her, but she was murdered. So now Ptolemy IV is dead. His wife is dead. And now you have Ptolemy V, who is a young ruler at this time, probably between 10 and 13. Okay. Let's look at Daniel chapter 13 and 14. And again, this is the overlap that I'm talking about here. The last chapter 11, verses 13 and 14. Now, for the king of the north will rise again, a greater multitude than the former. And after an interval of some years, he will press on with a great army and much equipment. Now, in those times, many will rise up against the king of the south. The violent ones among your people will also lift themselves up in order to fulfill the vision, and they will fall, but they will fall down. This is very interesting now, because at this point in chapter 11, this is now the one time where Israel is mentioned. The violent ones among your people. Who is the man talking to? He's talking to Daniel. Okay? So the violent ones among your people, whose people? Daniel's people, will also lift themselves up in order to fulfill the vision. What vision? The vision. What vision? But they will fall down. Let's talk about these terms here. Violent ones. Let's look at what this means. Violent ones, the way that it's translated is not really violent ones. It's not really that. The Hebrew word is ben. This Hebrew word occurs again about almost just shy of 5,000 times in the Hebrew scriptures, but this word occurs 10 times in the book of Daniel. It's really not translated violent ones. There's a word for violent. It's not this. It's mostly translated sons or human beings. Why would they translate it like this? It's just the sons of your people. In this context, this is speaking of the person's lineage or their physical progeny. So when he talks about the sons of your people, he's speaking about Daniel's descendants, those that come from, again, Israel. That they would rise up in order to fulfill or complete the vision. What is this word vision? Well, it's not been. There we go. It's kasak, I think. This Hebrew word occurs 35 times in the Hebrew scriptures, 12 times in the book of Daniel. Again, this word is translated vision. We've seen this word, as a matter of fact, all throughout the book of Daniel, although I have not stated it as such explicitly. As a matter of fact, in Daniel chapter 1, verse 17, all the way back in chapter 1, it is expressed with Daniel and his companions. As for these four youths, that is Daniel and the companions that he's with, the three companions, God gave them knowledge and intelligence in every branch of literature and wisdom. And Daniel even understood all kinds of visions and dreams. This is the thesis statement, right? All of the visions and dreams that we've seen up to this point in the book of Daniel, God gave him understanding to know in this information. Okay? This is the same word here found in this text in Daniel 11, that the sons of your people will arise in order to complete the vision. We see this word too in Daniel 8, chapter 1, verse 2, concerning the vision of Daniel with the ram and the goat and all that. It says, in the 3rd year of the reign of Belshazzar, the king, a vision appeared to me. Daniel subsequent to the one which appeared to me previously, which is associated with this word here. I looked in the vision, and while I was looking, I was in the citadel of Susa, which is in the province of Elam. And I looked in the vision, and I myself was aside the Ulai Canal. He makes it clear that this is something that is given to him. So each time this word is used, it's mostly used to discuss the things that God reveals to human beings supernaturally. In the case of the vision that this individual is saying to Daniel, I am convinced that this refers to the ultimate deliverance of Israel. That's what they were looking for. That's what they were looking towards. Fall down. Kashal is the Hebrew phrase for fall down. They will fall down as a result of this. This is verse 13 or verse 14, I'm sorry. But they will fall down, kashal. This Hebrew word occurs 65 times in the Hebrew scripture, 6 times in the book of Daniel. It essentially means to fall or to stumble. Now, this could be like a literal fall or a literal stumble, like you stumble when you walk in or something like that. It can also be used in a figurative sense to discuss being slain, killed, or being unsuccessful in their plans or activity. So the one man described to Daniel that it would seem that the nation of Israel, at least some of the sons of the nation of Israel, are looking to the promises God communicated to them and believing that they are responsible for bringing this to pass, will rise up against the king of the south. But they will be unsuccessful. Now, let's take a look at some of the details here. The king of the north will assemble a multitude greater than the former. After some time, the king of the north will continue with great army and equipment. This is what's found in verse 14. In these times, there will be many who will rise up against the king of the south. There will be the ones from Daniel's people that will rise up to complete the vision, and they will not succeed. Now, I've got 5 slides left and 5 minutes. Let me introduce you to another individual that I have not mentioned up to this point, but I had mentioned that I would earlier. Enters Philip V of Greece. Okay? What does Philip V have to do with any of this? Well, Philip V was born in 238 BC, and his reign was from 221 to 179 BC. Philip V, again, was a king, was a ruler of Greece who went back and forth to war against Rome. Okay? He lost most of those. So in 206 BC, he was able to settle with Rome on favorable terms. He just signed a treaty. Look, let's stop the fighting. I'm losing anyway. Let's just live at peace, right? And they did that. After this treaty, he turns his attention to the east, okay? And conspires with Antiochus III. Isn't that nice? Antiochus III again. Antiochus III just wants to take Egypt. He wants it so bad. So what they do is Philip V and Antiochus III come together to invade and plunder the riches of the Ptolemaic Empire under Ptolemy V. It was during this time with Philip V and Antiochus III that some of those who were in Israel joined forces with both these men. Okay? These individuals were known as Jerusalemites. These Jerusalemites were Jews who dwelt in Jerusalem and were those who were encouraged to uprise due to God's promises. They thought that they were to be the ones to fulfill essentially the liberation of the nation of Israel from the hand of the Gentiles. They believed that they would play an active role in making this happen. So, despite the alliance made between Philip V, the Jerusalemites, and the king of the north, they were unsuccessful. Even with a king, even with a child king, they were still unsuccessful. They could not pull this off. They couldn't pull this off. So here's where we are. We have Seleucus III, Soter, from 225 to 223, 2 years. He makes up chapter 11, verse 10. We have Antiochus III the Great, which rules from 223 to 187 BC. That is Daniel chapter 11, verses 10, 11, and 13, respectively. We have talked about Ptolemy IV, which is Daniel 11, chapter 11, verses 11 and 12 and 14, respectively. And then of course we have Ptolemy V, which again we have gotten to just briefly in this particular discourse, but we will talk about him next week. Again, the one man described to Daniel the back and forth conflict between the king of the north and king of the south. There are tons of details within these 3 verses, these 3 statements overlapping one another, right? All of this detail concerning the intrigue and the battle between the king of the north and the king of the south, and right smack dab within this battle is Israel, who is now seemingly participated in this particular battle. They kind of were on friendly terms with, whoever they were, who was governing them, but now it seems like they have input themselves into this battle, and yet even then they were still unsuccessful. We will continue with chapter 11, verses 15 and following, Lord willing, next week. Let's pray. Lots of details, lots of moving parts, lots of complex timelines and individuals that are involved in the intrigue and the world control and power, dominance within this region. And right smack dab in the middle of it is Israel. What an amazing text that this one man is given to Daniel for us to read and think about and ponder, that this is history, past history that has happened and has been detailed for us to know and think about. I pray, God, that we would continue to put our assurance in your word that it is true, that all of these things happened, that Daniel didn't get to see any of this, but we get to read this and see how it all lays out. And that gives us confidence for the things to come and how they're laid out. Again, thank you so much for who you are and for what you have given to us. For it's in your son's name. Amen.